Imagine sitting down to a Roman dinner party. You do not sit at all. You lie on your side on a couch, propped on one elbow, and eat with your fingers while slaves bring dish after dish. And the first thing you would taste on almost everything was a sauce called garum. It was the ketchup of the ancient world, and Romans poured it over meat, fish, even fruit. Garum was made by packing fish guts and blood in salt and leaving them to rot in the sun for months until they dissolved into a liquid. The smell was so foul it was banned inside some cities. And yet, the best garum was wildly expensive, a luxury worth more than fine perfume. Welcome to the ancient table, where the food was stranger, richer, and often far more dangerous than you could ever guess. At a rich Roman banquet, the goal was to shock your guests, and no dish did that better than the dormouse. Romans fattened these little rodents in special clay jars, stuffing them with nuts in the dark until they were plump. Then they roasted them, dipped them in honey, and rolled them in poppy seeds. The wealthy also prized the tongues of flamingos, served as a delicacy for the emperor's table. And a roasted peacock was the ultimate showpiece. Cooks would carefully save the feathers, roast the bird, then dress it back up in its own plumage so it arrived looking alive. One Roman writer described a fictional feast so absurd it became legend. A roasted hare fitted with wings to look like Pegasus, and a whole pig that, when carved open, spilled out live songbirds. It was satire and exaggeration, but it was mocking real habits. The richest Romans really did compete to serve the most outrageous meal in the city. These feasts grew so extravagant that Rome actually passed laws against them, limiting how much a host could spend and how many guests he could invite. The laws were almost completely ignored. Now, you have probably heard that Romans ate until they were sick, then rushed to a special room called a vomitorium to throw up and start again. That is a myth. A vomitorium was never a vomiting room. It was simply the passage that let crowds pour out of a stadium. The word just means a place things rush out of. But the real danger at a Roman feast was hiding in the wine cup. To sweeten cheap wine, Romans boiled grape juice down in pots made of lead. The lead gave the wine a pleasant sweet taste, but it was slowly poisoning them. Some historians believe this quiet lead poisoning damaged the health of Rome's ruling class for generations. The Romans even wrote it all down. The oldest cookbook that still survives is Roman, filled with recipes for everything from stuffed dormice to spiced flamingo. It is named after a famous gourmet named Apicius, a man who loved fine foods so much that, the story goes, when he feared he could no longer afford his lavish lifestyle, he poisoned himself rather than eat simply. But for all that excess, most Romans ate very plainly. The true staple of Rome was poles, a thick grain porridge. For centuries, the Greeks mocked the Romans as simple porridge eaters. And the poor of the city rarely cooked at all. Their cramped apartments had no kitchens, so they bought hot meals from street counters called thermopolia, the fast food of the ancient world. The city ran on bread from hundreds of bakeries, their heavy millstones turned by donkeys and slaves. In Pompeii, whole loaves were found still inside the ovens, stamped with the baker's name, preserved by the ash of the volcano. One seasoning was loved above all others, a plant called silphium. Romans used it in cooking and medicine, and craved it endlessly. They harvested it so greedily that it vanished from the earth completely. Silphium is one of the first plants humans are thought to have driven to extinction, simply because it tasted too good. One seasoning did survive, and it shaped our language. Salt was so vital for preserving food that Roman soldiers were partly paid in it. That salt money was called salarium, and it is the very origin of our word salary. The Greeks dined differently. After dinner came the symposium, a drinking party, where men reclined, talked philosophy, and drank late into the night. But there was one strict rule. You never drank your wine straight. Only barbarians did that. The Greeks always mixed wine with water, and a chosen master of the feast decided the exact ratio for the night. When they were good and drunk, They played a game called karabos, flinging the last drops of wine from their cups at a target across the room. Fortunes were bet on the throw. Not everyone feasted like this. The warrior Spartans were famous for the most disgusting dish in Greece, a black broth. It was pork boiled in salt, vinegar, and the animal's own blood. One foreign visitor tasted it and said he finally understood why Spartans did not fear death, because death had to be better than this soup. Travel south to Egypt, and two foods ran the entire civilization: bread and beer. Workers who built the pyramids and temples were often paid in bread and beer, day after day. It was food, drink, and wages all at once. Egyptian beer was not the drink we know. It was thick, cloudy, and nourishing, almost a liquid bread, and everyone drank it, including the children. Their bread hid a painful secret. Grit and tiny bits of sand from the grinding stones got baked right into every loaf. Over a lifetime, that sand ground people's teeth flat. When we examine Egyptian mummies today, even young pharaohs have teeth worn down to painful stubs. Still, Egyptian bakers were artists. They made dozens of kinds of bread and cake, shaped into animals and spirals. And they prized onions and garlic so highly that these humble vegetables were given as temple offerings and paid to workers as wages. At an Egyptian banquet, guests wore garlands of lotus flowers, listened to harp music, and were served by the finest cooks in the land. Tomb paintings even show guests wearing cones of scented fat on their heads, which some believe slowly melted into perfume through the evening. Whether the cones were real or just a symbol, scholars still argue. The Egyptians loved sweetness, and their sweetness came from honey. They were among the first beekeepers, tending hives along the Nile. Honey was so precious it was used as medicine, given as temple offerings, and even sealed inside tombs. Jars of honey found in ancient tombs were still edible thousands of years later. They also force-fed geese to fatten their livers, creating an early version of the rich delicacy we now call foie gras. Back in Rome, the maddest emperors turned dinner into pure theater. One reportedly served guests fake food carved from wax and ivory, and mixed real peas with grains of gold. The same emperor was said to have smothered his dinner guests under an avalanche of flower petals dropped from the ceiling, though ancient writers may have exaggerated the tale to blacken his name. Emperors also served the truly exotic, brought from the far edges of the empire: ostrich, roast parrot, camel heels, and the tongues of songbirds by the thousand. And the spice that drove them wild came from the other side of the world: black pepper, carried all the way from India. Pepper was worth so much that when a barbarian army later besieged Rome, part of the ransom they demanded was a literal mountain of peppercorns. Because in the ancient world, a feast was never only about food. It was a weapon of status, a way to show your power, your wealth, and your reach across the entire world. On the wall of one Roman dining room, a mosaic showed a grinning skeleton holding 2 jugs of wine with a simple message: enjoy the feast, because one day it ends for us all. That was Chapter 6. Subscribe, and next time we pull back the curtain on love, dating, and marriage in the ancient world. I will see you there.